It was about time. Servus Freunde, my name is Cage, Jimmy Cage, and after it has been postponed multiple times, No Time to Die has finally arrived. It marks the fifth and final time that we see Daniel Craig as James Bond, and it's the 25th film in the official canon, not counting Never Say Never Again and the two previous versions of Casino Royale. And of these 25 official Bond movies, I have to say that it's among the best. It was directed by Cary Joji Fukunaga, and it's a rousing finale for the Craig era and a worthy send-off, which is also something that hasn't been achieved before in the franchise. I mean, it's probably the most famous movie franchise when it comes to changing the lead actor every other decade and somehow rebooting it, but also somehow moving forward and keeping some elements the same. It has never been a series particularly careful about any kind of continuity, something that only really came out to the foreground with the Daniel Craig ones, which is of course a chance to create some kind of overarching narrative and increase the emotional resonance of the character. It can also be a burden and difficulty and make things overtly convoluted and contrived. And I think No Time to Die is a testament to both poles. It is convoluted and a bit contrived, but it also delivers some emotional punches I wasn't expecting this strongly in a James Bond movie. Of course, this review will be spoiler free, so I won't really get too much into the actual story. But you should know that it's very much a sequel to the latest film Spectre, and it's definitely a good idea to read the story summary of that one before going into No Time to Die. It continues where the last one left off, and the relationship between Bond and Madeleine Swann, played by Léa Seydoux, is without question the emotional backbone of the movie. Craig plays a Bond who has lost his love at the end of the first film, and this one begins with him seemingly having gotten a new chance to be happy. But of course, things aren't that easy, and the movie is on one hand very much relying on rather familiar spy genre tropes, but on the other, it's not your typical Bond, and certain elements are treated slightly differently. And it's honestly enough to make a difference and give this a special touch that we haven't seen this way before. We also haven't seen this much Bond before, because No Time to Die is the longest Bond movie with a runtime of 2 hours and 43 minutes. But I actually never thought that the movie was dragging or too long. It's really nicely paced, and in best Bond manner it delivers a good balance of moving the story along with all its little and big twists and turns, and also delivering some nice action set pieces. A definite highlight is the whole pre-title sequence, which I'm pretty sure is also the longest pre-title sequence yet. It's the first Bond film that was partly shot with IMAX cameras, and the beginning looks simply awesome. Linus Sandgren has been the director of cinematography, and it's a pretty gorgeous looking film throughout, but that whole IMAX beginning was really special. It looks and feels so authentic, beautiful and visceral that I was honestly disappointed that the rest of the movie, aside 2 or 3 small exceptions, wasn't shot in IMAX. Even the entire finale wasn't. I think it's a bit unfair to tease me with that beginning and then not giving me the full IMAX experience. But I of course know that that's complaining on a high level, and like I said, the movie looks great throughout and the action feels very tangible. There's a certain bloodlessness about the shootouts because of the PG-13 rating, but it nonetheless feels all very impactful and practical. They also again kept the gadgets to a minimum, and unlike other big action movies nowadays, this one always seems to take place in the real world. There's also this really strong long continuous shot in the film's finale. We have seen something like this several times at this point in other movies or series, but it's still impressive, and I was really surprised how little I felt the actual age of Daniel Craig in this one. The man was already 50 during the shoot, and he couldn't do as many stunts himself as in the past. But you don't recognize that in the film, and he looks great. But it's not just his physical presence. I would even say that No Time to Die marks his strongest performance as James Bond, or maybe even in his entire acting career. He's that good and committed in this one. His portrayal, as well as the dynamic with his co-stars, it's just great. The banter with Jeffrey Wright's Felix Leiter is wonderful, as is the playful, flirtatious back and forth with the new Bond girl Paloma, played by Ana de Armas, who's not that much in the film, but when she is, she's great and also quite funny. Then there's of course the familiar dynamic with Moneypenny, Q and M, and new on board, Nomi, played by Lashana Lynch. There's also one of those fantastic hero-villain confrontations where the villain is locked up and the hero has to face him to get some new information. Christoph Waltz isn't much in the movie either, but the way they staged and filmed his entry is so gorgeous, and it's really fun to see these two big actors go at it. even just for a small amount of time. The movie's main villain is of course played by Rami Malek, but surprisingly he's also not really in it that much, which I think is to the film's detriment, but thankfully it doesn't really harm it too much. He's a little bit too much just the typical Bond bad guy. His motivation and plan too paper thin, and he simply doesn't get enough screen time to fully build this menacing presence that you wish for in this culminating finale. But I think he's still good enough, and while the overall story seems a bit contrived, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if there are dozens of plot holes to be found, I was still very much engaged and immersed in it and tried to connect the dots. Like I said earlier, it's certainly relying on familiar tropes, and we have seen the hero turning against his agency or cleaning up their mess countless times before, but the storytelling is pretty neat nevertheless, and more than before there's an emotional weight to it that really worked for me. There are also some nice lighter moments as you would expect in a Bond movie. I only wish they would have used the famous Bond music cue more often. The score by Hans Zimmer I would probably describe as functional. It has some strong pieces. I particularly enjoyed the sadder and more romantic moments, but when it comes to accompanying the action, it felt a bit too familiar and like many other Zimmer scores. Not really a negative though, it did work. Overall, I had a pretty fantastic time with the film. When it comes to rousing, on the edge of your seat spy action thrillers, Mission Impossible Fallout is still superior, but this comes close. So in German I'd say, Keine Zeit zu sterben ist ein bildgewaltiger, emotionaler Showdown der Daniel Craig-Ära. Cary Joji Fukunagas Film hat die gewohnten 007-Zutaten, geht aber trotzdem einen Schritt weiter und serviert uns einen Bond, wie wir ihn so noch nicht erlebt haben. I give No Time to Die 8 out of 10. It's more like 7.9, but I don't do that. Alright, that's it like always. Comment below and let me know what you think about No Time to Die. And also let me know what is your favorite Bond movie. You can hit me up on Twitter, Instagram and Letterboxd, and also on Patreon simply at The Jimmy Cage. And if you enjoyed this episode, please give me a thumbs up, share, subscribe, whatever you like. And make sure you hit that bell for all I have to tell.